Okay, we are live with um, Jessie, and her blog is just amazing, and it is all about um, training through pregnancy and postpartum. And
Yes,
I was fascinated by it, and so I had to know more. So that I mean, like that's a great niche for training, and tell me a little bit about yourself and your philosophy on it, and how you got into it.
for sure. Thank you, by the way. I appreciate that. So I guess really how I got into it was I did my undergrad in phys ed at Queen's in Kingston, Ontario. And through undergrad, I was working at a couple of different studios and personal training jobs there, and got to work at a company called Body Now for moms and kids. And that company was completely all pre and postnatal training. So that was the first time that I had really seen women training hard in pregnancy. And I just thought it was so cool. The women were so inspiring, and it was just a different population than what I was used to training and seeing working out. So that was really cool. And then Queen's University at the time had some really interesting research going on in pre and postnatal exercise, some great researchers there. And I got really interested in it, and then went on to do my master's in human kinetics at UBC. And my master's research focused on pre and postnatal exercise. So spent some real time researching and writing on the subject there, and yeah, just really enjoy working with women and pre and postnatal women in particular. So it's just kind of taken off.
That's great. I I've only had the opportunity to actually train one woman while she was
Yeah,
pregnant, and she was a beast. What was
totally.
her name? I if my memory is not escaping me, I think it was Deanna. And I was having her bust out pull-ups when she was
Totally.
pregnant.
I know.
So,
It's awesome.
d d yeah, so the thoughts on exercising when you're pregnant. What's your limitation factor? Like, what do you tell women when they're first starting out with exercise like that?
For sure. I think that I start with quite a bit of education with them just to convince them about how the body can be challenged and pushed during pregnancy, and that it's actually a really positive thing, not only for them but for the baby as well. So limitations, basically, I tell them that never do we want pain. We can have a bit of uncomfort just in being pushed physically, but not uncomfortable that there's some weird aches and pains. There's maybe pulling on the pelvis that doesn't feel quite right. Anytime that they're feeling like I need to take a little break here, that's when we just stop and we take a step back and go back to things that weren't so taxing. But really, we just talk about rate of perceived exertion and what kind of levels they should be working between for intensity throughout their workouts. We don't really talk about exercises particularly, some definitely, but we don't limit it too much in terms of hard and fast rules for exercises that we can and can't do, or heart rates that we should or shouldn't be working in between, because the research is just changing so fast right now that we just don't know enough about that stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I mean, back when I was researching the programs for women,
Yeah.
I mean, it was very vague. It was like, well, do this, don't do this,
Yeah. Yeah.
at the 12-month period, you're kind of on shaky grounds, and
Yeah.
and then, you see gals and you start training them, and it's like, yeah, I mean, why is there a
Yeah.
limitation? I mean, this woman is like a rock star. She can do just about anything. She can outperform some of my other
Yeah.
gals. So, um,
Definitely.
that's great stuff.
Hmm.
Um, all right. What? what's kind of a trend that you've noticed through training women? Like some of the
Yeah.
problems and some of the things to watch out for, just general stuff.
Yeah. So some issues that I think to be considerate of, um, just you just need to understand how the body is going to change as pregnancy progresses. So in the beginning, say the first trimester, usually they're going to be feeling maybe a little bit crappy, kind of nauseous, tired. Some women will be totally fine, but some women can be really feeling not well in that first 3-4 month period. So you might really need to adapt your plan session to session. They might be feeling great one day, not great the next day. So you need to be quick on your feet in those kind of cases. The other things I would say to just be aware of is really watching posture and how their body is changing. And you need to really be considerate of your exercise selection and programming in that. And we can talk more about that after if you want to. So just postural changes and what we need to be aware of at the pelvis. And then if you have contact with their doctors, that would be great, just so their doctor kind of knows what you have them doing, if there's any contraindications that the woman has that the doctor has made them aware of. Just to have that kind of relationship with the doctor can really go a long way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, getting a good opinion from multiple different sources. I used
Yeah,
to do that with the physical therapist all the time. When
for
like on
sure.
call. Oh, well, actually, they were across the street from where I worked. It was like we had a nice little hookup. Like, hey, I pulled something in my neck.
Yeah.
Can you hook
What do
me
I
up? We go over
do?
there and they run, do their magic. And oh yeah, by the way, I got another client I'm gonna send you to fix.
Yeah,
So
that's best. Have your network and keep them close as you can.
yeah, I've kind of lost my network here since joining the army, but I'm rapidly gaining a lot more
Getting,
people.
yeah,
So.
that's
Um,
good.
Okay, back to the topic. I get sidetracked occasionally, so
That's okay.
all right. Strength and cardio. Now, like on your blog, you you call yourself a cardio Nazi, and my
Yeah,
my own take on cardio is like I love cardio, I love cycling, I love running, but
yeah,
if it comes down to weights and cardio, it's like always weights for me
yeah.
anymore. So what's your take on it?
Yeah. So yeah, my clients, yeah, they think that I hate cardio or that I never want them to do any of it. They're afraid to tell me that they want to run 5Ks, but that's not the case. I just think that we need to prioritize strength training and strength building over cardio. And I would like them to do different forms of cardio when they do it, if they do it, and not necessarily that traditional steady state stuff. Unless they really love it and want to do it, then that's perfect. But I just think that when we strength train, when we weight train, that the benefits just surpass the cardio work. So I'd like them to put their focus there and then keep the cardio stuff as on the side activities.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Let's put them behind the prowler. Ready? Go,
Exactly.
go.
You're right. Way better.
Okay. Do you think are there any strength training moves that you would consider contraindicated when you're pregnant?
Mm. Um, yeah, definitely. So, and this will probably be more towards the end of pregnancy once things are getting pretty far along. But one thing that we need to be really aware of is how the core is functioning and what that abdominal and pelvic floor strength is like. So, say, for example, a woman has a diastasis recti, which is the separation of the rectus abdominis muscle. And that is very, very common, especially as we get to 8th, 9th, 10th month of pregnancy. So if
And
they're,
you also mentioned with multiple pregnancies that was more likely to happen as well.
for sure, absolutely. So if those abdominal muscles separate and don't come all the way back together, and then we just compound that with multiple pregnancies, then likely that core is going to be very unstable and weak. So if you think of that, then you can basically see what we want to train and what we don't want to train. If the core and pelvis are unstable and weak, then we need to be careful when we're heavily loading exercises. So say we're setting them up for maybe a sumo deadlift. They have a diastasis when we're in that bent over position, and even a sumo deadlift is more upright, which is great. But the abdominal muscles and core has to fire so hard in that position when we pull the weight from the floor. If there's not enough strength there in the abdominals, then other areas are really going to take that pressure, and probably the lower back. So that gets a little bit scary. So we need to check all our prenatal clients and our postnatal clients for diastasis recti to make sure that there either is none, or that we know how to fix it and correct if there is a diastasis. So things like that, really knowing how that's functioning. And then I always say no flexion at all, because again, speaking from that diastasis perspective, if there is a separation and we're just flexing them forward, we're just increasing that bulging and that pressure against the abdominals. So it's doing us no help. We're actually hurting them more than we're helping them. So that's out. And then also front-loaded exercises in a diastasis, not good. So something like a front plank, or when you're on tabletop position in hands and knees and maybe doing a bird dog, the core is just not going to be able to stabilize well enough, and there's going to be too much pressure forward on that anterior wall of the abdominals. So that stuff is out. So careful loading if the core is getting a little bit weaker, can't fire strong enough. That's what we need to be careful of. Other stuff that we hear of quite often is the whole no lying on the back after first trimester, 4 months. But I don't really adhere to that. I leave it to the woman's discretion. If they're doing a supine exercise, so an exercise on their back, say dumbbell chest press, and they feel okay, then that's great. We'll keep them on the back. If they don't feel so great, maybe take it up to an incline and work from there. But I don't really adhere to that rule. Yeah. And usually they're only in that position.
And that would kind of make sense, because, I mean, like, you're going to lie down at some point anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, that's going to be, like, one of your safest positions. I never understood that rule either. It's like, don't come back because you're going to feel a lot of stress on the heart and the diaphragm. And it's like, you already got a stress on the heart. I mean, you're already, your heart rate's already beaten. So.
Exactly.
Good point.
Yeah. And some women, maybe if they are quite bigger in pregnancy, they will feel uncomfortable like that. So you can adjust it. But for most women, I've never had an issue with it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I hadn't read that term in like so long. I couldn't even remember how to pronounce it. I was like,
yeah,
I know what that is, but I haven't seen it in such a long time.
Yeah, it definitely took me a while too.
So, in your let's break away from the training aspect, and we'll talk about different like the differences between pre and post.
Yeah.
What are some of what's your biggest goal once postpartum?
Postpartum?
For like, gals that, I think it would be a very big problem for gals that haven't been training, because, I mean, their core is going to be bad. If they do have DR, they're going to be having a real tough time getting their abdominal function back along with their core stability. So, how do you go about fixing someone like that?
Right, completely. And absolutely, it's why I encourage women to be training and exercising during pregnancy, because it just makes their life so much easier afterwards, like you're saying. So really, you need, I think of that return to exercise, that postpartum phase, as a bit of a rehab phase and a whole lot of corrective work. So I don't love that term corrective exercise because, I mean, what's the opposite of corrective? It's really just hurting them. So everything we do in exercise hopefully should be corrective. So, but basically, corrective exercise is what we need to do with them.
Hey, I've seen some people do some crazy stuff in the gym. So, I mean, from some of the
Yeah, right.
CrossFit junkies to the hardcore functional guys that, they just
Yeah.
don't get it. Like, hey, let's balance on a physio ball and, push weights up over our head and do like catches and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it's sad that I used to experiment with some of that stuff, and I'm like, wow, that was just so dumb. And then like,
Oh,
you grow as a trainer and you kind of figure out what your kind of
yeah.
niche is and what strengths and weaknesses you have, and after you've tried everything and you're just like, well, this is what I'm going to stick with because this is what I know does stuff. So
Exactly. It all goes back to basics is really what I'm starting to learn more and more. And yeah, that's exactly what postpartum training really is back to basics, getting those abdominal muscles to start firing more normally again and getting the pelvis back to a more neutral alignment and really just building that base, taking the time. Don't rush anything. It's going to take months before the body starts to feel a bit more normal. So yeah, just go slow, train consistently, challenge the body, but train smart.
train smart, yeah. I
Train
so wish
smart.
people would do that. So that's one of the big things on my website. I just want to enhance people's overall training experience and kind
Yes.
of cut the junk out, do this, don't do this, and
Yeah,
find what you need for you. Like it's I think that's a big problem in today's society is people just follow along with whatever advice is given, but they don't really take the time to absorb it and make it their own so that they can adhere to it.
definitely.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree. Yeah, it's just finding what works for your body and yourself and your lifestyle. And it doesn't have to be a crazy circuit when you go to the gym. Yeah.
all right. So Um, how about nutrition? Let's talk briefly about nutrition before we cancel off on this little interview. I don't want it to make it too long because otherwise people won't want to watch. Then we can
Yeah,
talk later offline after I turn the recorder off.
for sure. So, what specifically about nutrition?
What do you suggest for your clients when you're initially counseling them, like they are pregnant and they have a baby, and then postpartum? Like, is there any specific recommendations that you give them, or is it pretty much just the
Yeah,
standard fare of training wise?
definitely. I would say pretty standard, but then with some tweaks. So, think that I just try to remind them that is so important and more than ever to fuel their body and think of their nutrition as fuel and not just for themselves but the baby. So fuel their bodies, fuel their baby, so important. And then in understanding that they are going to need to increase their calories in pregnancy and postpartum. But it doesn't have to be the eating for two thing. So really in pregnancy and postpartum, they might increase calories by 300 to 500 calories a day. So that's not eating for two.
Yeah, that's like an extra toast and
Yeah,
peanut butter. There you go. There's your extra. Oh, boy.
definitely. Yeah, and eating when they're hungry and just not going crazy with it. Fueling, eating whole foods, eating cleanly, trying to reduce their sugars is probably one of the most important things. Yeah, and then fluid intake, definitely a big one in pregnancy and most definitely postpartum, getting them to drink quite a lot of water, herbal teas, and making sure those electrolytes in their fluids are high.
Okay. That sounds like pretty great advice. So Everybody, you got to check out Jessica's blog. I'm going to post it on my website, CaptainSmashFitness.com. Spreading the word about proper way to train for you. So let me click this off here.